following up on an interesting story I read earlier this week, and a further expansion of the story appearing in Sunday's Carter County News-Times, is an effort to maintain and restore Cape Lookout National Seashore's Lighthouse. This is a particularly important issue for our area, not only for our immediate area, but I would argue for the state of North Carolina. We have some unique facilities here, and of course the Lighthouse and the Lighthouse Keepers facilities are all unique, and we have joining us this afternoon to talk about that and the need for money and funding and support, Jeff West. He's the superintendent of Cape Lookout National Seashore. Jeff, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
You figure about $8 million in repairs needed to the lighthouse. Wow. A lot of people aren't thinking that a lighthouse would need that kind of attention, but of course, it's something also that deals with safety, does it not?
Absolutely. It's a lighthouse can look really good sitting there, and that one does right now too. But when you start looking at some of the more technical issues with the lighthouse, then things get a little gritty.
This is after major investment was made, I'm thinking maybe 15 years ago. As a matter of fact, I saw you earlier today, made mention of the fact I had climbed the lighthouse not too long ago with my, I know it's hard to believe I have grandchildren as young as I look, but be that as it is, with my grandchildren, and I saw the photos that you sent me, and wow, there's been major deterioration. The elements take their toll, don't they?
They do, and we have periodically, since we took ownership of the lighthouse, Coast Guard transferred it over to us, we have done repairs to get us through. The problem with doing stopgap measures is the bigger picture catches up with you, and a big chunk of I'll just talk about some of the issues with it. So we've got a masonry structure over there, and the masonry structure needs to be able to breathe. If you hold water in it, it will cause both the mortar and the bricks to disintegrate over a period of time. And the lighthouse at one point in time, actually several points in time over its long history, was painted with a type of paint that would actually not breathe, not allow water to pass through it. That's got to be rectified, otherwise the moisture will continue to be held inside of it. The other issue we got over there is a big portion of the lighthouse is cast iron. For instance, the stairs themselves are embedded into the masonry portion of the lighthouse. And unfortunately, as cast iron rusts, it begins to expand. And when it expands, it cracks the masonry joints and the bricks in the lighthouse. So a lot of those repairs need to be done. The exposed part of the lighthouse up above the tension ring, the exterior walkways, the exterior roofs, the moldings that hold the windows in, they all deteriorate over time, and they're not the things that you can just, stick out there and put a paintbrush to. The cast iron metal needs to be treated. Some of it over the years is fractured, and it's not easy to repair fractured cast iron. It's a cumulative period of damage that the lighthouse has suffered that we've got to answer to now.
I know a lot of people are thinking, well, the lighthouse has been there since 1850.
Long time.
Why do we need to concern ourselves? But let's talk about the impact and the influence on tourism and also the benefit to those that get to see something that is of historic nature as that lighthouse.
There is an economic impact to that lighthouse. It draws people in. Visitors love it. And to be able to walk the lighthouse, a structure that was built with great reason. I mean, maritime protection, when the maritime industry was arguably the most important industry in the United States. But there is a cultural attachment. Not only people from this area, but let me tell you, that's strong. There are a lot of folks that they can trace their family history to one of the many keepers that were out there at the lighthouse. But there is a feeling about, I don't know if it's the romantic idea that, the lone keeper protecting the shoreline. I don't know if it's the solitude. I don't know if it's the connection to a different time and period in history. but people love and care about lighthouses, and the Cape Lookout Lighthouse is certainly no exception. And perhaps there's even a stronger, local attachment than to many of the others along the North Carolina coast. It's important to us in ways that stretch beyond economics.
Your job is more than just keeping the area clean, accessible, but keeping it vibrant and working. Do you have responsibility for Portsmouth Island as well?
Yes, we do. We've got a little over 40 historic structures up there at Portsmouth. And, of course, Dorian was as unkind to us as it was to the village of Ocracoke, Hurricane Dorian. Every single historic structure at Portsmouth Village was damaged, some of them heavily damaged. We've not only got the responsibility, but, there's something deeper than just a legal responsibility. I mean, people that work here love that place up there, and certainly our visitors do, and certainly the local community. Once again, Portsmouth has been around since 1753. There are not too many residents of Carteret County that cannot trace their history up through Portsmouth. So, once again, there's a very powerful local tie to it. Visitors from other areas love Portsmouth. And, one of our thrusts lately has been recovering the historic structures, not only at Portsmouth, but also at Cape Village, and rehabilitating them. We've been able to support a historic preservation crew that has worked miracles. We have been able to leverage storm money recently for contracting opportunities to get some of the buildings repaired. A lot of progress is being made, but I'm really proud of the efforts that the employees, the volunteers, groups like the Friends of Portsmouth Island, the Core Sound Museum, a lot of different organizations have helped contribute to the success we've had with preserving and protecting some of those structures.
How can folks here locally, how can the state of North Carolina assist in this? Is there a process for doing that?
Yes, there are a number of different processes. We do get and take donations that can be targeted for specific events or projects, and we've got one donor that has just all by himself supported the historic preservation program here. And, of course, the Friends of Portsmouth Island, they have done a lot of donation work, both in hours, volunteer hours, and monetarily towards preservation of those structures up there. That's all outside the normal funding. Our base funding, which is about $2.6 million a year, it's not insubstantial. That covers all park operations, including preventive maintenance on historic and modern structures and other assets throughout the park, roads, water treatment systems, et cetera, et cetera. But we also have another way of getting funding, and that's what in the Park Service referred to as project funding, and we apply for those funds as they come available, and it's a fairly complex application procedure. We began the application procedure for the Lighthouse in 2014 for the larger project. I'm going to just use it as a great for instance. Our initial estimate, based on the current economies and the estimates that we got from the engineers and architects we brought over to look at it, was about $5.5 million to repair the lighthouse at that time. The latest estimate put it at $16.9 million. That's this year's estimate, $16.9 million, to basically accomplish the same thing that we'd hoped to accomplish back in 2014, plus some additional damage that's resulted. But on that 16.9, you can also add the inflation and escalations that's just associated with current economy and the problems with supply and labor that everybody's running into. So it's hard to stay in front of this kind of thing, but I am very confident. The National Park Service does recognize the importance of iconic structures like the Lighthouse, and I'm very confident that we're going to be able to work out a funding mechanism to make the needed repairs.
What time frame are you looking at for the possibility of repairs? And of course, every day that you delay, the damage and degradation increases, and so it's almost exponential. then the numbers begin to increase as well, the cost for repairs. What kind of time frame are you looking at this point?
So you're absolutely correct about that, and I hope, right now my dream is to get this thing, off the rails and into active construction sometime in fiscal year 24, which starts for us in October. Doesn't mean we'll start in October. Right now we're in the design phase of everything that needs to be done. My dream is that we'll go ahead and do this in phases based on the money that we have right now towards it. And as we complete a phase, I'll be hopeful that the next phase funding will come in. There's nothing guaranteed about that, but we've got to start, and we've got to start soon just because of what you just said. The longer we delay on this, the worse it'll be. Right now, it seems so simple on one level. We have broken glass up at the light level, and it's like, well, just replace the glass, right? Well, that's very specialized glass, and the way it's fitted in there is it takes a metal fitter to do it. So it's not like you can just do things piecemeal. It makes a lot more sense physically to do the things that fit together that are going to require a certain amount of effort from a certain amount of artisan to be done at one time. And that's kind of what we're working out right now on our schedule is how to make all that happen. My dream is that we're open for the 2025 climbing season. April of 2025, people will be able to be back in the Lighthouse.
Is there any effort at the local level to help contribute to support for funding of that program? And I mean that possibly letters to Washington, D.C. or Atlanta, wherever the central office is. Is there anything that can be done in that regard that would be of an assistance at this point?
Well, like I said before, the National Park Service and all of the folks that support us are definitely recognize the importance of the Lighthouse and the project. And I really don't see any issues with funding coming through. Absolutely, if folks wanted to donate money and they wanted to be sure it went for the Lighthouse, they could send us a donation and say that it is earmarked for, Lighthouse restoration. Anything like that is obviously greatly appreciated, and we'll put it to good use. But, this is something, and this is something that folks have already paid for, and continue to pay for, and it's just something that we need to make happen through the systems that we have out there. So I will always appreciate any extra help that we get. Like I said, we've got one donor that basically has funded our historic preservation crew and made so many things happen. And outside of federal contracting, which is very expensive for us to do, when we can take our people and provide them with the materials and supplies they need to do the work, the training to do the work, we get a bigger bang for the taxpayer's buck and for our donors' buck. So that's what we shoot for. Lighthouse is a whole different thing, though.
We talked about the issue of that lighthouse being plumb. Tell us a little something about that story.
So one of this is kind of an interesting thing. One of the early things that the engineers wanted to know was how much movement was going on in the lighthouse, because they were concerned that, there was movement, and if there was, that was going to have to be dealt with. To monitor a structure like that can be pretty expensive, time-consuming, and difficult. But we have within our agency a very specialized and very advanced GIS capabilities, and they were able to come out here and map the structure. They've been out here 3 times and established permanent monitoring points, and we actually even have a telemetry antenna so that it can be monitored at any time and double-checked at any time. The lighthouse is 5 centimeters out of true from the base to the top, and after the architects and the engineers looked at the telemetry and the documents that GIS put together, they said it was built that way. So it has not moved. It's not moving. She's rock solid.
Can you imagine 1859 and they're off 5 centimeters?
Is it the truth?
I tell you what, they must not have been the engineers that got the A in the class. I say that.
No, I bet you're right. I bet they weren't.
5 whole centimeters out of true. All right. We want to thank Jeff West, Superintendent of the Cape Lookout National Seashore there. By the way, their office is located at the beginning of the road in Harkers Island. I always have to remind people it goes east to west, and it's at the beginning of the road and Harkers Island. Go to that, and that's where their offices are located. And also, you can get a ferry service over to Cape Lookout. Jeff, as always, thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Lockwood.